Our guest this month is Tony Zemak of Tampa Fire Rescue. During his 29 years with the department, he served as rescue captain, a hazmat captain, and is now a district chief. And Chief, welcome to American Heat, and thanks for having us here in Tampa. We appreciate it.
Welcome to Tampa.
We've got to get through the priorities, the incident priorities, and there are three things that we need to keep in mind. Can you share those with us?
Yes, the fire department responds to a plethora of different types of incidences, and they all vary considerably, but there are some things that we keep in mind when we respond and when we show up to these alarms. The first thing is our incident priorities, and they are life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. Now, those things will remain in that order, but the way we achieve those may be varying some. An example would be life safety being our primary priority is the thing we want to accomplish first, but for instance, if we had a high-rise fire, it might be more prudent to us to stabilize the incident by putting the fire out in lieu of letting the fire continue to burn and spread and look to evacuate the people. But generally speaking, life safety will be our primary priority. Incident stabilization will come next, and then property conservation. I try to think of the word LIP, L-I-P, to help me remember those when I arrive at a scene.
So keeping that acronym in order, as far as you can't get away from those priorities, but you can reblock them as far as what the incident dictates.
Correct. A lesser point, but still important, is property conservation. And generally, we normally achieve that after the incident, covering people's property and getting water out of the structure. But sometimes, depending on the manpower, we may be doing that in conjunction with attacking the fire, in conjunction with evacuating people from the building. We know the priorities, and how we elect to achieve them is up to us depending on the incident.
Now, there's a whole flow of strategy that's going to come out of this, and we're going to get into that later on in the program. But first, it really does come back to real-world incidents. Now, when a fuel tanker overturned and caught fire last December, Tampa crews responded to what they thought was going to be a fairly straightforward job. But in this case, the location of the accident, well, it threw them some curves.
We've heard the jokes about Florida drivers, and we can tell you they aren't true. American Heat was there for a week, and not once did we see the little blue-haired lady doing 30 in the passing lane with her blinker on.
You might want to check what chest is.
The reality is, traffic in Tampa is no joking matter.
You gotta go across the chest, we're just not gonna put it on tight.
16 times a day, on average, you'll find a scene like this somewhere in the city limits.
Breaking glass!
That's why the members of Tampa Fire Rescue consider vehicle extrication skills to be one of the basics.
We need to put back pressure on this door.
And they know, when the basics are second nature, only then do they really have the power to adapt and overcome.
We try to practice our hand tools, saws, hacksaws, hammers, etc. Learn your hand tools. Learn your wrenches before you learn your pneumatic wrenches. You don't, give a semi to a 16-year-old driver. Training not only familiarizes you with your equipment, it gives you the parameters. If you don't know how far you can push these tools, you don't know how far you can push yourself.
And as our stories will show, you never know when the ordinary will turn into the unusual. Veterans Expressway is a limited access divided highway just like most urban interstates, except where it marks the western boundary of Tampa International Airport. That's where it gets a little confusing. Merging traffic keeps drivers on their toes, especially during rush hour. It's one of Tampa's busiest roadways. And in one spot, the exit ramp to Independence Parkway is on your left. That's where drivers in the fast lane have to make a fast stop. Those who aren't careful are in for quite a ride, especially if they're driving one of these.
This incident occurred on the northbound lanes, which has a very sharp curve. I believe the speed limit out there is 25 miles per hour. The driver was going around this curve at approximately 45 miles an hour and laid the tanker over on its right side.
It was about 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Rush hour was well underway, so the initial dispatch sounded just like all the rest.
Engine 8 BLS, auto accident, Independence and Eisenhower, 1559 hours.
It come in as an automobile accident basically, and we sent one unit with a BLS unit, basic life support ambulance. And that's what was on the printout.
Just take the out of the way.
Most of the companies approached this incident northbound on the expressway on the east side of the bridge, which was between this bridge and the airport. There was a lot of traffic that afternoon. Traffic actually had to be shut down, and it backed up for miles back towards the city of Tampa, which impeded the apparatus from coming in on that side.
As I was coming down Hillsborough Avenue, seeing all of that smoke, I knew it wasn't a normal automobile accident.
Oh my God!
But I really hadn't yet heard anything about what it really was until Engine 8 came on the radio and gave a size up.
Engine 8 was the first on the scene. Firefighter Larry Glanton was expecting to be back in quarters in no time. It wouldn't happen.
As Eisenhower and the veterans and Independence split up, as soon as we was getting over the hump, we seen a little fire. As soon as we got a little closer, it blazed on us. And then the nerves, the goosebumps, and everything else came out.
Engine 8, we've had an ignition of the gas tanker. It is burning underneath. I believe that's Eisenhower Boulevard. Stay right here, Eric, stay here. And we're going to need a full-on here hazmat situation.
That would help us out a little bit because we had to slow down traffic. Well, for traffic, we probably got a little closer. Then been probably a little dangerous for us.
A burning gasoline tanker with 8,700 gallons of unleaded fuel is something that I've never wanted to respond to. When we arrived on the scene, we looked to the left, and all we could see was a lot of fire consuming this overpass.
A lot of things that could happen had already happened when we got on scene. The tanker had already breached, it had already spilled its contents, and it ignited just about the time the first company got on scene. So all of the bad things that we would like not to have happen had already happened when we got here.
Instantly, crews had to shift gears and to make some unexpected decisions fast.
Priorities are no different really for a tanker incident or a regular building fire. It's life safety first. Make sure that any endangered personnel are out of the way. Initially, when I got on scene, everyone that was close had already evacuated. Things like that, if people can get out, they get out before you get there, and they pretty much had.
The driver had escaped with only minor injuries, so incident stabilization became the next priority.
Initially, when we pulled up, due to the public life safety not being a concern, we knew that we had to establish a water supply. After we laid our supply line, we started stockpiling foam in anticipation of setting up some hand lines to assist command in their objective of extinguishing the fire.
Stabilizing this incident meant getting close to the truck.
The way that the scene laid out, the truck was underneath an overpass. That made it kind of hard for them to get to it.
It was laying on its side up against the bridge abutment with the frame and the wheels outward, facing outward, which was difficult to apply foam.
As crews moved in with hand lines, they noticed something unsettling. The concrete overpass was crumbling and falling to the street below, threatening to collapse. Back to priority number one.
Top priority is always life safety. The incident commander was not going to place any crews next to or directly underneath the bridge, and all of the crews were not going to get next to or underneath the bridge either. Nobody wanted to be close to the bridge.
Now, Tampa firefighters had a problem. How could they possibly stabilize this incident if they couldn't safely get to it? The answer was only a quarter-mile away at Station 2.
Actually, we were just sitting down to dinner, and we heard the explosion. And it actually shook the station here. And we all jumped and went to the window, and our first thought in our minds was an aircraft is down. We were looking for an aircraft on the runway, and we didn't see anything but looked back, and all we could see was fire and a column of black smoke.
The ARF trucks from Tampa International Airport showed up. And that was a great feeling to have them there because we knew that they had the knockdown power to knock this fire down.
Well, the first time we made our initial attack, we went in and knocked the fire down. The vehicle is capable of applying 3,000 gallons of finished foam product, AFFF at 3%, within 2 minutes. So 2 minutes doesn't take very long when you're working a fire that quickly.
They seemed to have a little bit of difficulty extinguishing the fire because this tanker was compartmentalized.
And the fact that the fuel just wasn't laying in a pool on the ground, the inside of that tank is compartmentalized, which means they have to get foam in every compartment to completely extinguish it. And the angle from which they had to approach it made it hard for them to do that.
Handline crews still had their hands full trying to stay ahead of the burning fuel spill. Free-flowing gasoline was running away from the tanker in all directions, both above ground and below.
The storm sewers themselves were burning. We had fire coming out of the grates on the storm sewers.
Flames coming out of here.
Advise all units not to put their vehicles close to the storm drains. There is fuel in the storm drains and it is burning.
And as it became more of a hazard to us, we had to reposition the truck.
Advise remote engine 12 is shutting down for about just a few minutes, and then we're going to move the engine up away from the manhole.
In this incident, Command set up 2 separate operations. Because apparatus could not go under or over the bridge, responding companies had to be assigned to either the east side or the west side prior to arrival.
On the east side of the overpass, the bulk foam carrier actually arrived, and they set up their operation and flowed foam off the aerial ladder on that side. On the west side, the only resources that we had besides the ARF trucks were some hand lines.
It was the highway equivalent of surround and drown, and it worked. Removing the truck was the last obstacle. It was eventually dragged out from under the structurally unsound overpass and hauled off on a flatbed. Tampa credits their successful outcome to quick thinking, a little bit of luck, and a lot of basic know-how.
We have trained, since we're in close proximity to Tampa International Airport, we have trained with the ARF crews out there, so we knew what their capabilities were. On the other side, with the bulk foam carrier and the foam 4 operation, we have trained with that. We usually try to train with that equipment at least annually, and we knew the capabilities of that and how to set it up, because it is quite manpower intensive and there's a lot to it. So it takes constant training with that apparatus and that truck to be familiar with how to set it up.
We've covered incident priorities, and now it's time to talk about strategic goals. And I gotta tell you, in studying up for this, I've got so many acronyms in my head that it hurts. I've got REVOS, RECIVOS, FRECIVOS. What do you go with? And let's get into that.
Well, the most comprehensive one that I've seen is FRECIVOS. Not easy to say and probably more difficult to remember. My suggestion is to have that written down somewhere as a checklist to prompt you into basically remembering those things that you should be remembering.
Wait, you don't have a checklist right now, so you're going to have to go through it with
Well, that's fine, and
okay, we got you on the spot.
I enjoyed the test. The first letter would be F, and that's firefighter safety. More and more that's being emphasized because firefighters are going into dangerous situations, and they need to realize that if they become the victim, they don't help anybody out. So we emphasize that. The next letter would be R. R is for rescue. Generally, I look at rescue being saving people in the most dangerous area of a particular incident, and generally speaking, that probably means us assisting to get them out of that danger area. The next one would be evacuation. I look at evacuation as an activity that we would assist people out of a dangerous incident, but generally they can do it on their own. An example might be an intercom telling people to evacuate a building, or stretching a line into a stairwell to protect that stairwell to make sure that people can get out.
Okay.
The next one is exposure. Exposure basically is the structures next to the incident. And in many cases, the structure involved could be a total loss already. So our concern is to not let that thing spread and to protect those adjacent structures from becoming part of the incident. The next one would be confinement. We try to not let the fire spread. We confine it to the area of origin and try to keep it as small as possible. Right. And the last one and most obvious is extinguishment. Put the fire out. After that, we look at ventilation. Now, ventilation is interesting, and I'll say here that all of these things we're talking about, they do not have to be in any particular order. It's just that these are the ways we've listed them.
You can remember it this way, but yeah.
Right, and I remember that ventilation should actually be considered as being one of the first things done. If you can remove the superheated gases and the smoke and reduce the potential for backdraft or flashover, then that's what we're looking to do up front. In many cases, firefighters will take a beating inside of a structure because they did not ventilate and reduce those dangers. So ventilation comes in low on the word, but it could be, or it should be, a higher priority.
Okay.
Overhaul. Overhaul is not too glamorous. Basically, it's going in there and looking for hidden fires and making a total extinguishment. And the last thing is salvage, reducing the loss due to the fire.
Now, the whole point of this program is to adapt and overcome. And could you share with us from your point of view, how can we take all these things that we've got to remember and apply the principle of adapting and overcoming?
I look at this list that we've just gone through as strategic goals, and I identify strategic goals as obstacles that we've identified that need to be overcome. And I think if we adhere to that list in whatever order we find most appropriate, then we can hopefully assure ourselves of a positive outcome.
So identify those obstacles, and then it's a matter of applying the tactical end of things, and we're going to get into that later on in the program. But first, we're going to go back to the real world. Our next incident made national headlines. You may remember the small plane that was flown into the side of a downtown high-rise, and you may remember what you were thinking when it happened. For Tampa firefighters, the initial thoughts of terrorism were quickly replaced by a completely different set of challenges.
The beach at Fort DeSoto is about a 45-minute drive from Tampa. But if extreme water sports are your thing, it's worth it. There's no better spot to catch that fierce Gulf Coast wind for a few hours of kite surfing. If you've got the time and a couple grand for the gear, it's a great way to spend an afternoon.
I heard that one.
That's good. Hold right there. Good to go. See you tomorrow. Ready.
But for these Tampa firefighters, kite surfing is out of the question. They have other extreme things to do. On this day, they're training for a scenario they hope will never happen. They'll be rescuing, so to speak, a stranded window washer, and they'll do it by rappelling from the top of the tallest building in Tampa. 42 stories, one rope, and no net.
A lot of stretch. We have our victim in place, our simulated window washer. We're going to deploy the yellow line, a 5/8 yellow line, which is going to be our rescue line. That's going to be my rappel line. I'm going to go down and perform the pickoff with that.
About 50 feet.
Tampa Fire Rescue uses this building for training on a regular basis. As Fire Chief Pete Botto says, they know this building like they know their own stations. So if the real thing ever happened here, they'd be ready. It did, and they were. 15-year-old Charles Bishop had dreams. He was only a freshman at this suburban high school, but he had decided years before that he would be an airline pilot, and he had already been taking flight lessons for 2 years. After the horror of September 11th, Bishop had even told a teacher that he would like to join the Air Force to do something good for his country. None of his friends or family, even today, understand why, on one Saturday afternoon, he threw it all away. Charles Bishop arrived 15 minutes early for a flight lesson. An instructor left Bishop to practice his pre-flight checklist while he finished with another student. When he returned, Bishop and the plane were gone. Bishop took off from the St. Petersburg Clearwater Airport and turned east towards Tampa. He entered restricted airspace at MacDill Air Force Base, the Central Command Center for the war in Afghanistan. A Southwest Airlines jet taking off from Tampa International had to shallow out as Bishop passed only 1,000 feet overhead. A Coast Guard helicopter motioned for Bishop to land. He refused. Instead, Bishop turned his plane towards downtown Tampa. And just as terrorists had done in New York City only 4 months before, he flew the plane straight into the tallest building in town.
Tampa Fire Rescue, what's the address of the emergency?
It's on the corner of Kennedy and Ashley. It's the Bank of America building. A plane just flew into it.
The initial dispatch was actually a Yellow 3, which is an aircraft down off the airport, and it actually came in on Ashley and Kennedy. And my initial thoughts were that we had a plane down on the actual street of Ashley and Kennedy, somewhere in there. So I wasn't too concerned until I read the comments and it said that we did have an aircraft inside the Bank of America building.
Well, units responding to Kennedy and Ashley be advised the plane is still in the building and may fall.
It was a Saturday, and staffing was light. Many apparatus were rolling out with only 3 personnel, and many personnel were riding up out of their usual assignments. Captain Ellers played it safe, even as he was just rolling out of the station.
Well, you know, first thing is, like everybody else has thought of, is this 911 all over again, you know? Responding down there, I imagined what I could see. I just, you know, my imagination ran wild.
As we came down there, there was debris all over the place. Glass, aircraft wings, fuel on the ground. Of course, all the bystanders looking up, pointing fingers.
The first thought was, oh gosh, I hope it stays there. We were concerned that it may fall out. We were surprised it wasn't on fire and worried that it might catch fire. Mostly just the stability of the aircraft. How much damage did it do to the building, particularly the room that it was in, because we knew we were going to have to go up there.
The initial size-up of the situation raised countless questions, all of which had to be answered. The challenge was to figure out which issues to tackle first.
The things start going through your mind. How do we rescue the people? How do we get this plane down, make the environment safe around here? Things like secondary devices went through your mind. Are the guys going to be safe going up there?
Was there somebody in that office area? Was there somebody on that floor? And of course, the aircraft was capable of holding up 4 people, so we had to make a primary search of that aircraft to find out who was in the aircraft and if they were survivable. After 9/11, we had talked about it many times down at the fire station, being a downtown station. What would occur if this ever did happen here in Tampa? What would we do? But again, our whole main priority in the fire service is life safety. That is the bottom line. That's what we're there for. So we knew we had to get crews in there.
Engine 1, Area 1 will go up inside to inspect the building and inspect for any survivors. We need to start by getting the units to get the supplies of foam on the first floor. I understand you have foam on the first floor. Engine 1, Area 1 going into the building to do primary search. That's acknowledged. Let's keep everybody outside until we find out the structural stability of this aircraft.
Additionally, there was a wing on Kennedy Boulevard, which was our main route down there, and there was glass and fragments of aircraft all over the place.
Area 1, Engine 3, let's get a line on the ground, and I got a wing over here with fuel leaking. Let's go get some foam on it.
Initially, only Captain Ellers and 3 other firefighters entered the building. They were the ones who had to put thoughts of terrorism aside and start making decisions.
Once we got off on the 28th floor, the 28th floor was pretty much like nothing had happened until we got down the hallway where that office was.
The first thing that hit me when we exited the elevator was the wind. There was wind blowing and dust, and you could smell the fuel. We knew we were there. We went around down the hallway. Visually, the first visual sight I thought was the office itself, with the walls were bowed out from the impact of the aircraft. Once we made it to the door of the office, when we looked into the office, there was total devastation, and of course the cockpit of the aircraft sitting there.
All right, sir, I'm on the 28th floor, okay? I'm right with the plane. We have one DOA, it looks like. I am not going to go out into that. It's halfway in, halfway out. And then somebody bring up, next engine, bring up
When we got to the floor, we had fuel, which turned out to be avgas, coming from a wing that had lodged into the actually 29th floor. It turned out to be less than about 30 or 40 gallons, but we weren't sure exactly how much. We had fuel still inside the aircraft, and we had some fuel within the office area that we needed to get foam down pretty quick. Our initial line it's a protection line. That was just water, straight off a standpipe. And my other concern was now we need to get foam up here. Our main priority is life safety. That's taken care of. My next worst case scenario is this aircraft start burning. So I had to switch to a sort of an incident stabilization aspect of getting foam and attack lines in place. Then I had to switch back to the fact that, okay, now we got life safety on people below, so I had to switch back for securing the aircraft type of thing.
You don't want to have our rescue equipment up there? That's it. There's nothing we can do right now until we can get something to secure this. Do me a favor, bring up some lifelines.
The tail of the aircraft was hanging free and kind of blowing in the wind, and there was threatening gale force winds coming that evening, and we wanted to secure the tail for fear that it might become separated from the remainder of the aircraft and actually fly down from where it was.
There's some chains on Area 1 going with Glenn. There's some chains for tow rigs that we use with the winch, and come along with some straps. We might be able to secure it to a column.
Anybody that went out into that office, we tagged them off with tag lines and a Class 3 harness. We were running low on Class 3 harnesses, so basically we had to call in the county for assistance in that aspect.
We actually duct taped a hook to the pike pole and used the pike pole to reach out from a window and hook onto the tail of the aircraft. We had to break out a couple of windows that were not damaged from the incident. We had to break out a couple of windows to reach out and secure the tail.
People from building owners, for instance, when we decided to break the glass out on the 27th floor, which after we found out comes to about $5,000 a pane, that's why they didn't want us to break it out. They didn't want to pay us that money.
Securing the tail from the 27th floor prevented it from breaking off, but the weight of the tail still threatened to pull the plane back out of the building, engine and all. The solution for that problem was simple.
We used tow hooks, pretty much primarily used what they use in tow trucks all over the place to wrap or hook around the axle of a vehicle. We used them on Aero 1 as a stabilization chain, if you want to call, when we're using the winch. We were able to get that on one of the main gear struts, and then to a seat post, which is pretty strong. Then we anchored that to a come-along attached to several columns inside the structure.
Once the plane was secure, other agencies on the scene were finally able to get a closer look inside the plane. They didn't find a bomb, but what they did find told them that they needed to keep looking. Next to Charles Bishop's body was a duffel bag. In the duffel bag was a handwritten suicide note. And in the note, Charles Bishop wrote chilling words. He expressed his support of Osama bin Laden and the September 11th terrorist attacks.
Once I got that information in regards to that this was a deliberate act, we backed everybody else out except essential personnel, and basically all we kept were two lines and an officer there. Everybody else was backed out of the building, and everything was backed up about a block down below.
So the concern was, well, did he do anything else besides, crash his plane? Did he have some kind of bomb or pipe bomb or something in the plane? So out of concern for safety for the responders and the other individuals that were trying to resolve the situation, they wanted the plane swept for any kind of explosive device.
Some people from the Secret Service and ATF, I believe, went into the body and started turning it over and as best as they could to check it there was no explosives. Once it was cleared, the ME was brought in, and they then removed the body.
Finally, the last of the life safety issues had been addressed, and crews were ready to remove the plane from the building. That task would be the biggest obstacle of the entire incident.
This may be a once-in-a-career thing.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Strategic goals, which then lead to tactical objectives and then to tactical methods. And I know entire books have basically been written about this subject, but we need to get a handle on this in the here and now. What's a good example that's going to help us understand tactical objectives and then methods?
Let me try to simplify it. Strategic goals, once they've been identified, as an example, say ventilation. We see a need for ventilation. A tactical objective would be ventilating the roof of the building. Now, how do we achieve ventilating the roof of the building? We call in, say, an aerial unit, put them on the roof and have them cut it. Basically, the tactical objectives I look at is where the rubber meets the road. This is the actual physical application of what we're trying to accomplish on that particular incident.
Okay, and then earlier in the program we saw the tanker incident, and going to the whole concept of adapting and overcoming. Everything that we're talking about here really does come to play in that incident and how you guys handled it.
In the tanker incident, which was pretty interesting, is we had an overturned tanker on a limited access road, so it was difficult to get equipment and manpower there. This tanker was fully involved. It was compromising the overhead with intense heat, and the concrete was cracking and stuff. Well, we knew that we needed a foam operation, which was our tactical objective, and normally what we would do is we would send personnel in with foam lines to put this fire out. But because we had concern about the safety of our personnel, we elected to call out the off trucks, which are firefighting vehicles at the airport, which was approximately a quarter of a mile away, and they were utilized to apply the foam. They have a large volume of foam and they have great reach with their foam. So in this instance, we were able to stabilize the situation and reduce the life potential of, or the danger of the life loss of our personnel by keeping them further back.
It all comes back to those strategic goals. You've got a choice to make.
Sure, generally speaking, life safety is going to be paramount. The way you achieve the greatest life safety sometimes can vary.
It's a great real-world example. Now, going back to our story, at this point, Tampa rescuers have secured what's left of the plane, but they haven't yet determined what to do with it. Take a look at how Tampa solved a complex problem with a pretty simple solution.
Almost every Tampa firefighter we interviewed about this incident said the same thing. They had never trained for something like this because nobody thought it would happen. But the truth is, they had trained for it. What started out as a bizarre situation was gradually becoming a bit more familiar. Foam operations, vehicle stabilization, rope rigging, all were familiar skills that were just being put to new uses. So when it came time to overcome the biggest obstacle of all, it's no surprise that the best solution was the simplest one.
In order to get the aircraft out of the building, there were a couple of lines of thought there. One being to secure a 55-story crane and actually go up to the 28th floor, secure the plane, and lower it down from the outside. We were a little concerned about, with the winds and all the weather that was coming, to try to use a crane from the outside and have to try to work on the edge of the building. That might be a more dangerous technique. So we opted to pull the aircraft into the building.
This incident brought a whole slew of agencies to the scene. The FAA, NTSB, FBI, and everyone had to work together. Too many cooks in the kitchen could have been an obstacle in itself. It was quite the opposite. In Tampa, many hands and heads make light work.
We're a really good working relationship. We had experts from Tampa Police Department, a gentleman who's their chief mechanic over at the Air Service for Tampa Police Department. He was able to tell us, you know, hey, this is not that big of an aircraft. Here's how we could do it.
We cut the engine off first, put it on a roll around, took it down the elevator. Each piece of the fuselage was cut in sections and brought into the aircraft, into the building, and was taken down the elevator. I think it was about 14 pieces in total. And it did not take, I would say, no more than an hour or more. Once the fire department started bringing it in, we started cutting it. The whole plane was in the building and down. It was done.
We went through every letter in the alphabet that were out there. The command post was out there. The agencies interacted. We have the incident management system, where it's a unified command structure and we're all used to dealing with each other. And in this instance, we put it to work and it worked fantastic.
There always has been a cohesiveness. There's never been any jealousies or you got this, I got that, you know. No, we work together. They use our equipment, we use theirs. They have certain smarts that we don't have. We have smarts they don't have. Put them together, makes the ball roll a lot better.
And the amazing thing about it all, the only skills needed for this incident, besides a firm grasp of incident priorities and strategic objectives, were the basics: Vehicle stabilization, extrication, foam, with a little rope rescue, they all came together. And that's how you adapt and overcome. You don't invent new ways to do things. You invent new ways to put what you know to use.
Basically, the one that sticks out of my mind the most, and it wasn't really small. It was the whole aspect of cutting this aircraft up and bringing it inside of a building. To accomplish that feat, it was like, wow, we actually took an aircraft and brought it inside this building when everybody said, hey, you need to take it out. You know, it goes out the way it comes in. No, it doesn't. Well, we're going to continue bringing it in the rest of the way in.
And sit down and come up with a game plan and put every bit of training you had and a lot of wit and a little luck to put together to figure out what to do with a situation like this, to overcome it and be able to defeat it and take care of business. It takes a lot of knowledge.
Relief cuts are cut on the front side of the B-post.
16 car accidents a day our personnel go to and extricate folks. At times, some feel that we use our training grounds too much. In an instance like this, they're very grateful.
Now, in coming out of the story, the company officer has already identified one obstacle, not enough personnel, so the company officer strikes another alarm. Voila, more personnel. But there are more obstacles along the way. What have you seen here?
Oh, well, there were plenty of obstacles. One in particular, the tail section was blowing in the breeze, hanging above the street, and there was concern as how we could stabilize that. The request was made not to do any additional damage to the windows of the building, but the wisdom was to stabilize the tail section so it wouldn't fall on people down below. It was decided to break out additional windows so we could attach ropes and stabilize that. So in that instance there, we looked at life safety and incident stabilization as paramount over property conservation.
Okay, and how about other obstacles? Anything else that you see here?
Well, how we were eventually going to get that tail section out of that building and out of our downtown. The concerns were, one is that even though we stabilized it, it was still a half fix, if you will. So the idea was to bring in cranes maybe, and not only incur potential dangers in a big crane operation downtown. So the wisdom again was, in this case, instead of taking the plane out of the building, it was elected to pull the plane into the building, cut it up and take it down in the elevator. Again, getting back to flexibility and thinking outside the box as to what we have here and what can we do to make it better, and most of all, leaning towards safety. In that instance, again, life safety and incident stabilization became paramount over worrying about any property conservation issues that may come up.
We always encourage our American Heat viewers to apply hands-on training whenever possible. We recently asked the crew of Aerial 1 to demonstrate for our cameras how they brought the plane into the building and what equipment they used. Now, you might be surprised at exactly how they pulled it off.
My name is Scott Ellers, captain with Tampa Fire Rescue. What we're going to do is we're going to simulate with the tower behind us the various aspects that we used in tricks and techniques that we used to try and secure this aircraft that was up on the Bank of America building. Behind me is the ladder sticking out, which will indicate the aircraft itself, and that would indicate the 28th floor where the main body of the aircraft had gone into. Okay, this is our initial survey after we came in to stabilize the aircraft. If this was simulated in the room or the 28th floor. We had already done the primary search, a firefighter and myself, and we found that there was one DOA in the aircraft itself. Our next concern was stabilization of the aircraft to make sure that the aircraft would not fall to the streets below. This is the J-hook I was talking about. This is what our initial stabilization, and later on, is actually what we pulled the aircraft in with. These are J-hooks that we use on the truck company. Basically, we use them in conjunction with a winch. Most towing companies have them, and basically used to stabilize cars from rolling over or stabilize them in position. What we did is we found two anchor points on the aircraft which we thought from the entangled aircraft which would be the strongest. The first one was the right main strut of the aircraft with the landing gear, which was still intact to the body of the aircraft. The second, because of the way the aircraft was, the only thing that we could actually find that we thought was pretty substantial was the seat attachment on the right side of the aircraft, and that's where the second one went to. Okay, and that gave me the 2 anchor points that I needed with these J-hooks to secure the aircraft. While I was doing that, I had 2 other firefighters finding anchor points to wrap a rope around, 5/8" rope, to find a pretty substantial anchor point that's inside this building. Okay, for our training purposes on this simulation, we're representing our anchor point with this 1/2" rope attached to this stairwell. In the real incident, the anchor point was 5/8" rope, and it was wrapped 4 times around 4 to 5 large legal-sized cabinets, file cabinets, that were encased in one area around a column of the structure, which we were able to identify after punching holes through the drywall of some of the attorneys' offices. In this simulation, as we walk in, I'll show you where the anchor point is, where we hooked our aircraft into. Our final attachment point from this anchor point that we had set up actually ended up out in the hallway of the office, even though it was simulated in the office here. And then what we did was Firefighter Skinner was able to attach the come-along to our anchor point carabiner, and then the other point was attached to the aircraft where we attached the J-hooks, basically to those 2 points I put out before. We then went ahead and took up on the come-along just enough to take the slack out of the anchor system, the come-along, and the aircraft, just enough to keep it snug up inside the building so it wouldn't fall out to the street below. The next aspect that we were concerned about was the tail. The tail was swinging back and forth away from the building into the building, and that was a concern because it was only being held on by the skin of the aircraft. We were afraid it was going to break off and float away in the winds anywhere downtown. What we had to do is we had to come up with a system to get the eye bolt, which is basically no bigger than probably about that big, on the back of the aircraft, on the tail of aircrafts. What we did was we went down to the 27th floor, which was where the tail was hanging, and unhappily to the owners of the building, they didn't want us to break the windows out, but we chose to break the windows out anyway. At that point, we took a pike pole, secured a carabiner on the end of it, attached to another 5/8" rope. Again, to give us a good secure anchor point back to where we can anchor to the building so the tail would not swing around. All we had at the time was some first aid tape. Again, we adapted what we had. We held the gate open because we were afraid that it would not give enough push because the tail was about 6 feet, 7 feet out, that we could not get enough push onto the hook where it would hook onto and clasp back on itself. Again, this was just a temporary thing to secure the tail of the aircraft from swinging back and forth in and out. All the firefighter did was reach out and hook that tail hook. Now we're up on the simulated 29th floor of this structure. Everything done before, up until this point, was just to secure the aircraft. It was decided that we were going to bring the entire aircraft inside the structure, cut it up, and then take it down the elevator. On the 29th floor, what we did on the 29th floor, to help with that tail section that was just being held on by the skin of the aircraft to help bring it up so it wouldn't break off, we lowered a chain, pretty much a tow chain. We lowered a tow chain from the 29th floor down to the personnel on the 27th floor, so it covered 2 floors. They hooked it in to where that pike pole and carabiner was, and they were close enough at that point to go ahead and lock that carabiner closed. Then they turned around and hooked the rest of it into a come-along system, anchored off as before, anything that was available. And then once this was secured, all 3 floors coordinated a lift from below, which was the 27th floor with the pike pole, to push out. A drag of the entire aircraft in with 2 come-alongs on the 28th floor to pull the aircraft in, and a lift of this 29th floor to lift the tail straight up, so as long as the entire aircraft didn't come in as one unit.
Well, coming out of that and everything else we've seen in this program, you've got a lot to think about, and what we want to do is provide some kind of framework to get a handle on all this. And Chief Zemak, I'll turn it to you at this point. And it strikes me that what we've heard here, the unifying theme of all this when it comes to adapting and overcoming, is creativity, flexibility of thinking, being able to be spontaneous. How do you foster that?
Some of it comes with experience, going to different incidences and being taxed to come up with the appropriate response helps. Realizing that you're with a team that can give you insight into maybe the best answer. People that have had experiences in their personal lives, their experiences could be the answer we're looking for. I would also suggest that firefighters, learn your profession. Many of the disciplines that we're obligated to know, that information bleeds over to other disciplines, and all of that information combined can really help you to come upon a unique and flexible answer to problems. That helps. And the last thing I would mention is that in all kinds of emergency incidents, each firefighter has an obligation to play his part within the command organization. Know your part, and realizing that by not playing your part, you increase the potential for safety concerns.
Well, I tell you, it's always a pleasure when we get to meet people on American heat, and it's even better when we get to invade their home turf. We can't thank you enough for having us here, Chief.
Well, we're glad you came. Thank you very much.
Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
And we would like to thank all the firefighters at Tampa Fire Rescue who participated in our program, and to Captain Bill Wade, who provided much of the video footage you saw. Now, if you have stories or video that you'd like to share with the rest of the fire service, be sure to visit fetn.com and let us know. In the meantime, stay safe, and thanks for watching.